All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Nate HANKES. Welcome, brother.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah,
I'm grateful for the opportunity to connect.
yeah, good to meet you. We refresh my memory. Did we first correspond when you were on the Appalachian Trail, or had just finished, or there's something about the Appalachian Trail
Yeah, I think there
associated?
were multiple times I reached out, but the one that comes to mind is when I had sent you a copy of the manuscript,
Ah,
and
that's right.
I just said, "Hey, do you mind taking a look at this? And if you feel it's a good book, can you offer a blurb?" And you did, and I think that's really helped with the book sales.
Oh
So I
God,
appreciate
that.
that.
Well, you're
You know,
welcome,
it's
but we should have said that in public because I say no to almost everybody.
Okay, I apologize. I can,
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I
okay.
mean, I'm not kidding about the facts, but you're welcome to say whatever you want.
Yeah, I
No, I
guess at
mean,
a certain point,
go,
I
go
guess at
ahead.
a certain point, you're big enough that you just kind of have to ignore for your own sanity and your own mental health, just to say, hey, there's enough,
Yeah. Yeah.
not
I
enough
mean, I try
bandwidth.
not to ignore. I try to respond to people, when I can. Sometimes when I'm in the van and I don't check email for a few days, there are like 500 emails, and
Yeah,
there's no way.
that's impossible.
But yeah, it is it's a strange thing too because it wasn't so long ago that I had a book and was reaching out to people to see if anyone would give me throw me a line, and
Right.
so I remember what that's like, and I try to stay sensitive to that. But yeah, the scale can get a little overwhelming. So just remind me. I know I read your book and I liked it and I blurbed it, but remind us what it's about.
Yeah, so the book is Waking Up on the Appalachian Trail, story of
Right.
war, brotherhood, and the pursuit of truth. And it's, a story of transformation that takes place along the 2,200-mile Appalachian Trail. I hike with my brother, and, I'm dealing with my time in Iraq. I operated drones in Iraq in 2007 to 2008, and it really messed my head up. There's a lot of confusion because I grew up in a conservative worldview, and I was pretty tied up in the propaganda that came after 9/11, and that was my worldview. And then I went to Iraq, and I kind of saw how things were, and things weren't really making sense to me based on the lines and narrative that I had been fed. So when I came home, that's a lot to deal with. That's your foundation of reality, and when that's broken, there's this cognitive dissonance, and that was causing a lot of inner turmoil for me. So I ended up out on the Appalachian Trail, and I found a mentor, someone who had read all the books that about topics that I needed to learn about,
Mm.
and we had a lot of great conversations that really opened my mind. And the book, to a large degree, attempts to recreate those conversations and that transfer of knowledge. And then also me analyzing, like, okay, this is what I thought was real, and if what I'm learning is the actual truth, then the world we live in, there's some issues here that we need to discuss or think a little bit deeper about. The military industrial complex, um, the perpetual growth model of economics, which, having fought in a war for resources, I find that very concerning. And I think for not just for moral purposes, but for national security purposes, I think there is a overwhelming argument to push towards sustainability. And I discuss these types of topics in the book, and try to come to some sort of level of peace while I'm on the trail. It didn't happen while I was on the trail. I did get a lot of those insights that pointed me in the right direction of things to learn, and questions begot more questions. I started reading uh, the books, going deeper into philosophy, and then I eventually found yoga. And I had for a time sought out some spiritual practice or some way of dealing with my inner world and all that turmoil. But then I found yoga when I was in grad school. And this is in something that doesn't happen to very many grad students, but I basically had the summer off. I was waiting for some lab results to come in, and it was, we sent them off. So I had a couple months before all the results came in, and I had done all the work I needed to do. So I had 2 months where I was on a graduate student stipend, which is not a lot. And I focused on yoga. I was doing like the primal living lifestyle that I found out about from Mark Sisson and Mark's Daily Apple blog. He was on Rogan, and that kind of shifted my paradigm around food and how we interact with technology and things like that. And one day, I didn't even know this was a thing, but I had like a spontaneous mystical experience, and that totally wiped the slate clean. And for a while, it was a lot to take in. And when you are in those states, it's not necessarily conducive to being functional in the world. I'm sure, yeah, you're shaking your head, you're nodding. And so there was definitely a time period where I had to adjust to this new understanding of reality, I guess. And that's how the book ends, basically, is just saying, I found a semblance of peace. And that doesn't mean I don't think that there's things that need to change in the structure of our society and institutions and how systems are set up. But I'm able to look at those things and not feel as reactive and angry as I did as a young man. And I feel like this is just something people mellow with age. So it probably would have happened naturally, but I've always been an intense dude, and I really focused on the yoga, studying the scripture and stuff. And I just had that experience, and I still don't fully I can't fully articulate my understanding of God and reality and all of those things, but I do consider that mystical experience an act of grace, just something that happened that I didn't necessarily deserve. And it has, it's really helped me with my mental health and just peace of mind, I guess. Yeah. And I was actually interested to talk to you about that, because you do mention mystical states and shamanism in your book, Civilized to Death. So I know this is an area you think about. You've worked with Stanley Krippner, and I don't know if I believe he was contemporaries with Stanislav Grof.
Yeah,
Stanislav Grof. Yeah, okay.
Stan Grof, yeah.
Yeah, I really look up to that guy's research, and I actually found that research after that spontaneous mystical state, and I was trying to convince myself, because I had no context for it, I was trying to convince myself, I don't think I'm going insane here. I feel like this is a good thing because it feels very blissful.
Oh, good.
So I found his,
framed it that way.
So I found his work, and that really helped ground me in something.
Yeah, man. So much of what you just said, I would love to unpack a little bit. First of all, how old are you now?
I am 33.
Okay, so when you said we mellow with age, I was thinking this guy's too young to know.
Yeah.
We mellow with age. What the fuck is he talking about?
Just what I've observed, I guess.
Okay, you've seen other people mellow with age.
Yeah.
All right. By the way, I should tell everybody this conversation is on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. I keep meaning to mention that because not all of them are, and it's a new thing. And so if anyone wants to see Nate and the beautiful backdrop that he has there with the fireplace, mantelpiece, and my shitty ass backdrop, you can watch this on YouTube. Hey, show people the book. You mentioned you had the book nearby somewhere.
Yeah.
So people who are watching can take a look. Waking Up on the Appalachian Trail. Nice. Yep. Nice cover.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually a silhouette of my brother because he looks more like a thru hiker than I did. I grow like
He had the beard.
I grow like a young Bob Dylan type of beard, very Amish looking. I got made fun of. My brother grows like his face looked like an anvil by the end. I mean, it's a 5-month journey. So
yeah. So you went from south to north, I guess. Is that how?
No,
most
we
people
actually
do it?
we started in Maine, which is unusual, but we got a late start in July. So
July, huh?
Yeah, so we finished in early December, and we're dealing with winter, and generally people will start in the South in Georgia in the spring, and then they'll just go with the seasons and try to finish in Maine before snow socks
all
in.
the colors, so the leaves changing and all that. Yeah, and miss the black flies.
Yeah, so, for sure. And
yeah. So tell me, you guys started in July. Was that intentional, or you just got hung up on stuff? Or
I actually got hung up by the military. I had thought I was going to get out of the military in April, and I thought, well, we're young, we can probably make good time if we get to Georgia in April. And then I actually got stop loss orders, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with stop loss. It's basically where they say, we're going to extend your contract an additional deployment. Basically, they wanted to send me back to Iraq. I was able to create a paper trail with some health issues that had come up after my time in Iraq, issues sleeping, tinnitus. I had issues with my lungs. So I was able to work the system a bit and get out of an additional deployment, which I wouldn't have been very effective there anyways.
Yeah.
I was, at that point, I was pretty cynical, and there's no motivation or morale there. So it was good.
What branch were you in?
I was in the Army.
Oh. How old were you on 9/11?
I would have been around 14 or 15, and I actually witnessed on TV. I saw the second one hit live, and I knew nothing about geopolitics. I knew nothing about the security forces or foreign policy, and I just knew, hey, we got attacked. That's not a good thing. We should prevent that from happening again. So that was basically the juvenile understanding of what was going on in the world at the time.
Right.
And that definitely motivated joining the military.
Right. Yeah. For you and lots of other guys.
Yeah, of course.
And women. What led you into drone? You were a drone pilot or maintenance, or what were you doing?
I was a pilot and camera operator and a mission commander. So dealing with air traffic control. I actually, when you're young, you have all these visions of glory. And I thought, I'm going to join the infantry and be a warrior, and my dad, he knew that wasn't a good idea. Sometimes they could see better than we can. And he took me over to one of his friends who was a lieutenant colonel in the National Guard. And this guy sat me down. It was at his office. This guy managed a bank. It was in his office. He said, "You don't want to do that. That's he didn't even really bring up the fact that it was dangerous, just more so the fact that, you're a smart kid. You don't necessarily want to hang out with those types of guys. I've commanded those guys before." And then he said, "There's this really cool job that's opening up. I think it's going to be big in the future. It's operating drones. Some of them have weapons on them. Some of them don't. It's you'd be working for military intelligence." And I thought that sounded pretty cool. And I watched some videos on it, and the military has their recruiting arm. They have commercials. They make videos to make things cool, let her look cool. And I was pretty motivated to do that. I took the ASVAB, which is like the entry test for the military, just to check you out. You're cognitive abilities. They said I was good enough to be able to do that job, and I was able to get in from there. I actually joined when I was 17. Parents have to sign a waiver, and my parents are like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And I said yes, I really did. And that's something I grapple with in the book, is like, our brains aren't really formed, males, until we're about 25 years of age, and I'd assume the recruiting apparatus understands this. Obviously, they want to get young guys in their physical prime, but at the same time, if the cognitive aspect isn't there yet, that I see that as problematic and potentially dubious, like morally dubious. I'm trying to be nice about it, like.
Yeah, potentially morally dubious. That's like the nicest way I could think of to put that. Yeah. They don't want thinkers, dude. They don't want thinkers. They want doers. They want order followers.
And I noticed that in my time in services, some people were just happy for the paycheck, and that was fine. Some people wanted answers, asked questions, and those are often the people that left the military.
Yeah.
And that kind of gives you an idea of the filtering mechanism for who actually gets into leadership positions. Right. Because they're the ones that are willing to put up with it long enough to get into those positions. So and the leadership was a reason I got out as well. Pretty, just old school yelling. This is how you do it because I say you can do it. There was, when we just got into country, we had to set up our telemetry, big antenna on top of a building. And I don't know if it's true or not, but the word on the street was that someone had just been shot by sniper fire on that same building. And, one of my platoon sergeants said, "You guys got to go up there and set that thing up." And like, "Oh, do you want to wait until it's dark or something? Because there's just sniper fire." He's like, "I don't care. Get up there and do it." I was like, okay, this isn't cool. And, when you're in the combat situation, you hear the gunfire, you smell burning chemicals and tires and all that stuff from, IED attacks. It just feels real. And then you're on the rooftop and you're worried about sniper fire and all this. And it really cuts through the illusions of youth when you're in those types of situations. And that's when I started to question things. It's like, okay, this is real. There's actual consequences. And this is kind of where my ideology confronts reality. And reality was winning in that case.
Yeah. Yeah, it must be an interesting thing to confront the notion that your life is not worth to them what it is to you, right? Right. That guy's like, "I don't give a shit, go get the job done. You get shot, I'll just get another guy in here. You're replaceable."
Yeah, that was one of the things he'd yell sometimes, and I don't know if he really meant it in his heart, but he said, "I can take 15% casualties before anyone questions my leadership." And I don't know if that was just like a line that he had picked up in his years in service, but that was something he'd yell at us occasionally. Yeah. And it was kind of, I'm smart enough, I could go to college, I'll do that option instead. Because I had thought about doing military as a career. I don't actually, I know with the endless wars and our questionable foreign policy that the military institution is questioned a lot. But I think that a lot of times people that are drawn to the military are very service and community oriented. There's also people that join the military just because they want to kill people. I've seen both sides, but I do think there is I do think it's honorable in a way to aspire to serve your community in a selfless way. Whether being in the military is the best way to do that or not, I do acknowledge and see that in the service members, that, okay, that's in them. And I definitely honor that. And I've seen it. And I don't want to bash all soldiers or anything like that.
I agree. That's the central conundrum of talking about these things. It's like, we can talk about, like when I was living in Spain or traveling, one thing I was always very happy to hear from people was, hey, I really don't like what America's doing in the world, but I understand that you are an American, you're not America, right? Like, there's a difference between the person and the country. There's a difference between the soldier and the army. And that's really important. So sometimes I go off on a rant about the fucking, American military dropping bombs on weddings and, blowing people up from a bunker in fucking Las Vegas and then going home and having dinner with the wife and kids. And, I know if I'm not careful, people will think I'm pissing on that dude, that I'm blaming that dude, and I'm not. Ever. Just like, the distinction I try to make between people who work at Exxon and what Exxon is doing to the world. It's a lot of people, they just have a job, they're not responsible for the oil in the ocean.
Yeah, that's sticky territory, because we are all personally responsible in a way, but we are all navigating within the system as it's designed. So
right,
we should be critiquing the system so that people within those systems can get the insight from the critiques, and then make minute adjustments in the capacity that they can. As a soldier, there really wasn't much I could do personally, but I could inform the opinions of people around me, and who knows.
Well, and you're doing it now. Right? I mean, it's also a question of timing. Like sometimes you're in a situation where you can't really do anything about it except observe and remember. Yeah. And then later you can get out and you can get your shit together and you can write about your experiences and share those experiences. That's part of service, and I really agree with you. I know a lot of people who went into the military with the finest, most generous, selfless, kindest impulses, and that makes it even more tragic.
I agree that it's a tragedy. I served alongside a lot of people that were more empathetic, like they had empathy. They were empaths, if that's a term that you use as a trained psychologist. And unfortunately, those are generally the types of people that were affected the deepest by combat situations, which I think we can intuitively understand that would be the case. And it is kind of tragic. Yeah, there's just a lot of tragedy around that whole situation. And part of one of my motivations for writing the book was to share my healing journey, if you will, so that other veterans could see, you're not broken. There's things that can be improved upon, and it's possible. It's not permanent damage. These are things that can be improved with, things like yoga, which is starting to get some traction in the veteran community. Obviously there's like the initial thought, even when I've been pretty open-minded in my adult life, but even the initial thought when someone was telling me you should try yoga was, that's what girls do. That's like a stretchy thing that girls do.
Hippie nonsense.
Yeah, I just had no idea.
Yeah.
But that is starting to get through the veteran community. And, like I said, part of the motivation was to be able to provide an example, I guess, of, it's possible there is such thing as redemption and healing. And, I've experienced, so I know it's possible. And so go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I have got emails from military veterans that read the book and said, hey, thank you for writing this. Even got an email from a guy who was on the same base as I was. And, that makes it feel like, okay, writing a book is not an easy thing. And, you're in the trenches for years with no idea whether or not you're just wasting your time. But when you get messages like that, like, okay, that's good. It's worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Which is sort of a natural segue to what you wrote to me about in your email, that you're working on a new project that's kind of related to this.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah. So part of the proceeds for the book were to help get a nonprofit mission up and off the ground. And I've got a mother-in-law unit on my property. I've been remodeling it for the past year, just, nights and weekends where I have the time. And the goal is to make that available to post 9/11 combat veteran authors and, up and coming authors. Maybe they have one book out. Maybe they've, just been grinding, putting some short stories out in online magazines or, and I just want to make this space available to them, basically offer a 5 to 6 month artistic residency where, hey, you guys have the freedom. I want to provide a stipend as well. You guys have the freedom to create for 5 or 6 months. Let your mind wander. I'll introduce them to yoga and mindfulness meditation, these sorts of things, if they're open to it. And I feel like not only the art that they create can have potential to affect many lives, but the just having that time to decompress and go explore their inner world deeply can have profound healing effects. So, it's definitely a commitment to get one, just support a veteran for 5 or 6 months as they write, and so I will be looking for fundraising support. I've got a membership blog where we'll be doing like weekly podcasts or sharing, what the resident artists are working on. And that'll be a way that people can support monthly, and they can also donate, one-time donation if they want to. So we're trying to add some value. And, if people think that this type of journey, not only the artistic process, the creative process for a veteran, but also like the inner healing journey, if they think that's interesting and something they'd like to participate and witness, then they'll get that access through that membership. And I'll just say it now while people are listening. The website is veteranarts.org if they're interested to learn more or subscribe or donate. And I think what we're setting up to do is going to be really special. I think that what we'll be able to share with the community of subscribers will be pretty unique. I plan on having conversations with veterans as they come in. All right, what's your mental state? What's your background? Where are you at? And then just kind of showing that journey, how they progress in those 5 or 6 months. I mean, a lot can be accomplished when you're not struggling for survival, you know? So that's the goal, is to be able to provide them that freedom.
And you're in Northern California.
Yep, Northern California.
So there's some space, there's some forest, some
solitude. Beaches are close, redwood trees are close. There's pretty well-developed yoga community, and very welcoming, very trauma-informed. And many of those studios have already said, hey, we're on board. They can come in, we're opening to them. So I think it's going to be magical in many ways. Obviously, I'll be here to support them through any challenges, and just with the been there, done that mentality. But
is this for writers only, or painters, or any other kind of art?
I think it's going to be mostly writers, and the unofficial tagline is that we're scouting the country for the next Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt Vonnegut,
man.
he might have been one of a kind, but
No, but he's a really good example because of his experiences in World War II.
yeah, he was a prisoner of war in World War II, and again, a sensitive type of character. And he struggled when he came home from service, and he eventually transformed that inner struggle into some beautiful and lasting artwork that has affected the lives of many of thousands of Americans. And I actually, in my perception of how the world works and archetypes, I would consider someone like Kurt Vonnegut to fulfill the same archetypal role as like a social prophet. I don't know if that's too far out for you, but generally like a social prophet would be someone who's kind of indignant about the injustices in the world, kind of shines a mirror on the culture so that people can see, okay, these are the errors of our ways, and this is, we might be able to align our actions in a way that's more in line with the values that we espouse. So I think that if we could get more Kurt Vonnegut's in the world, that'd be great. And if they're, if these messages are coming from veterans, that's actually pretty powerful, because then the media can't really, I don't know the word I'm searching for, but they can't poo-poo it. Yeah, if it's coming from a veteran. Like, I know they had a hard time with Tulsi Gabbard in her presidential run because she was a veteran, but she was saying things like, hey, we need to end these like perpetual wars for profit and stuff like that.
Suddenly she's Assad's friend, right?
Yeah, which is just ridiculous at the face of it, because she obviously was willing to sacrifice her life for the good of the country.
Well, that's fascinating, man. I think I love Kurt Vonnegut. I think Kurt Vonnegut is, I'd have to say, like one of my 5 favorite, not only writers, but people, like someone I just admire as a human being. And you were soft on his, he came back from World War II, but what happened to him in World War II was, when he was a prisoner of war, he was held in Dresden, and they had him and some other guys underground in a slaughterhouse where they were killing and butchering hogs, I think. And because they were underground so that it was cool, right? To keep the meat longer. And so they're underground butchering these hogs when the U.S. and the British firebombed Dresden, which is one of the great crimes against humanity in the history of war, burned the city to the ground. They knew they would. They were dropping bombs that were designed to spread fire. And Dresden had no military value whatsoever. So no one was expecting it. There were no munitions factories or there was no military significance. And the whole purpose was to try to break the spirit of the Germans by showing them that nobody's safe. Doesn't matter where you live. You could be far from concentration camps, far from strategic train terminals. We're still going to fuck you up. So everybody has to be scared. That was the thinking behind it. And so the bombs went off, the city burned down. These guys survived because they happened to be underground. And then they came up and they were put to work pulling bodies out of the rubble and burying bodies. It was hell, right? Yeah, he came into hell. And I don't know how long he spent doing that before he got out. But my point is, he went through some of the darkest shit any human being has ever gone through. And then he came back and he tried to make a living writing for magazines. And I think he wrote some ads for a while, some ad copy. And it was like, can't do this. This is such bullshit. And you can just imagine like how cleansed his soul was, right? Like, no fucking bullshit, man. I have been through the fires of hell. And literally. He ends up writing these books. Slaughterhouse Five is the book that people should read, I think, if you want to see who Kurt Vonnegut was and how he wrote, because that's partly about his experiences in Dresden, partly about PTSD, dissociation, psychological states. But the thing that blows my mind about him and Mark Twain, one of my other favorite writers, is that they express their rage through humor. You know, how fucking cool do you have to be to express, you know, as you were saying, this blistering critique of war, of patriotism, of American culture, but you do it in a way that makes people laugh. That's so fucking high level.
Yeah, and Kurt Vonnegut called Mark Twain an American saint. So he was aware of like this power to
same tradition for sure.
Yeah, definitely the same tradition. You could tell there's some influence there, and yeah, it does take an evolved person to, you know, not just. And we're seeing it in our culture now, like shame people, which you know I went through all these stages, and I'm still evolving, and you know, shame isn't a good look, and people don't like to feel shamed. But if you can add some levity and some humor to it, that's pretty powerful, and people are going to be more receptive to it. You know, I just listened to an audio version of him reading Breakfast of Champions.
Oh, really?
It made me like miss him. I didn't know him personally, but hearing his voice and hearing his just his philosophies, it made me miss him. And we definitely he did a service for this country, and you know those are the type of people I'm looking for with the nonprofit mission. Is, you know, let's find those voices that have something meaningful to say, and they might be currently in their life circumstances. They might be like Kurt Vonnegut. He was a car salesman for a while, a really bad one. He worked for GE.
That's right.
He was worried he was going to get fired because he was writing a novel about, almost prophetically, about how technology was going to, you know, change society in some negative ways. And I think when he sold his first short story, he just quit all his jobs and said, "Okay, I'm good enough. I'm good enough now. I can do this."
He probably got like $20 for it or something.
And he had a family to support as well, so it's right. Hard. But he was one of these voices that, you know, generations from now, you know, if we last, people will be learning from him. And it is those hardships and yeah, exactly. I'm really grateful that he sat down and recorded himself reading Breakfast of Champions. I just happened to stumble on that on Spotify, and it was a relatively short listen. But I encourage people, if you don't have the bandwidth to go and read Slaughterhouse Five, you can find some of his writing on Spotify, and I'm sure some's on YouTube as well, just to get that introduction. Yeah, there's a great biography about him. I think it's called So It Goes, and So It Goes. And he actually came from a pretty prominent family. Like his brother was a researcher at MIT, and his brother's the guy who came up with cloud seeding, which is like spreading some sort of like silver particulate matter in the air to seed clouds. So I just think he's obviously an intelligent guy, and did a service towards this country.
Yeah, and Slaughterhouse Five is an amazing film too.
Never seen it.
Oh, dude.
Cool. I'll check it out.
Yeah. That when I was in high school, I remember our history teacher. This was my senior year in high school. The history teacher was showing Slaughterhouse Five, you know, in like over 5 classes, you know, like 20 minutes each class or something. And after maybe 2 classes, somebody's parents started complaining, and it turned into a big deal because it was anti-American and, you know, anti-patriotic or some shit. Yeah. And I remember the professor. I remember his name too. He was super cool. I remember him saying, "Well, they're going to fire me for this, but I don't give a shit because I don't want to work here anymore anyway. And you guys, if we don't finish the movie in class, make sure you watch it on your own time. You need to know about this stuff." And and just to pique people's interest a little bit more, like this is not a boring, sad, Schindler's List kind of movie. This is part of it is war, World War II, like hallucinogenic almost, the sort of dissociation and weirdness. And then he kind of like pops forward in time and he's on a fucking planet somewhere being observed by aliens in a dome, and they like bring him his favorite movie star and they're supposed to breed. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
There's like all this like
he ends up in his zoo, and
it's basically a zoo. You're right.
Yeah, he was
some planetary species out there.
He was trained as an anthropologist at one of the universities in Chicago, and it's still a point of contention within the anthropology department because he submitted his book Cat's Cradle as his thesis.
Really?
And they awarded him his master's degree for that, and it's still like a controversy.
That's so funny.
But I mean, the fact that he was telling people for years that he was going to write his war memoir, or his war book, and then when it came out, people read it, and there's these weird time distortions. There's aliens involved, and there's scenes that can bring a tear to your eye. There's times where you'll be laughing out loud. So I think that brings a service. Yeah. But one of the things that he discussed in a lot of his books was the American like economic model, and he'd point to a lot of the paradoxes associated with the decision that policymakers would make to grow the economy would oftentimes not be good for workers or the environment. And he'd poke holes on a lot of that stuff too. And and that was another big point of contention, or I shouldn't say contention, like dissonance, coming out of the Iraq War, something I grappled with in the book. And you talked about a lot in Civilized to Death, where there's this perpetual growth paradigm economically, winner takes all paradigm. And one of the topics or things I feel called to speak about is, there's this emerging trend in the economy where it's like values driven businesses. Are you aware of what B corporations are, or public benefit corporations? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'll just describe it for listeners if they haven't heard about it. I think it's a promising innovation. It's a legal innovation where they're basically changing the definition of a corporation legally. So a corporation has to take into account not only profit, but people, so employees and communities and planet, like environment and sustainability and things like that. And the B corporation is basically these companies who are trying to move in this direction will put themselves voluntarily through an audit. Like, how are you stacking up against these, B corporation metrics that we follow? And if they score at a high enough level, then they earn their B Corp status, and they can put this B Corp logo on their packaging, and that signals to consumers who, a lot of people live busy lives. You're not going to go when you're grocery shopping or at the store and research, okay, how is this product made? Was it ethical? Right. Where were the raw materials sourced? And
so if you see B Corp, you can be pretty sure that this corporation's got those sorts of considerations in mind.
Yeah, it's going to be more in alignment with your value system than
Right.
just pulling off some item off the shelf. And
Right.
I've talked about this with a lot of conservative thinkers, and sometimes they'll scoff. They'll say no one's going to pay more for a similar product, and sometimes they're on board if I can phrase it in a way that says, well, a corporation that's only cares about profit, like they're going to spend money to influence American policy to make it easier to send jobs to places like China, or to I'm basically using the China example because that's a pretty hot button topic, and Trump made it popular, and then I think it's on like the conservative media, they're playing that up pretty hard. So it's like,
well, I think it's a viable thing. People pay more money than they need to have organic products. Right. Ethically sourced coffee, single source. I mean, especially with luxury items like fancy coffee and agricultural products, foods and things. I think there's definitely a market for it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, you're touching the microphone with something there. I'm not sure what's going on.
Sorry about that.
But yeah, it's I think it's a viable way forward. I was just interviewing a friend of mine, Richard Schweid, who's writing a book about co-ops and, basically corporations that are owned by the workers.
Yeah.
And there's one in Spain that's massive. It's one of the biggest companies in Spain. I forget what it's called, but they make like washing machines and refrigerators and all that kind of stuff. It's in the Basque country. And that's a really interesting thing, how in the United States, sort of, you were talking about winner takes all in this sort of exploitative economic system. We're taught that individualism is celebrated.
Yeah.
And working together is like kind of a socialistic, suspicious, you don't want to be part of a group. Even labor unions are demonized in this country, but this is all just to disempower workers. I mean, how long are we going to fall for this shit?
Right.
It's been, it's the oldest trick in the book. So before we get too far into the weeds, the economic weeds, I did want to circle back and just sort of get some of your impressions of your experience in Iraq. And of course, anything that makes you uncomfortable, just skip it. I'm not trying to put you in a difficult spot, but I do wonder, like, what is it like to be a participant in a war, but to be doing it through a screen? There's something very 21st century about that no one's ever experienced before,
Yeah. It's a very meta experience. So my particular drone system did not have weapons. We were in Iraq. So if we needed fire support, we would contact, helicopter, air cab, and they would lock on target and take care of it. So fortunately I was able to at least cognitively distance myself from any responsibility for taking another person's life. But I would say, you're looking down on the combat zone, and you're seeing things pretty much every day. For our first 5 months is extremely violent. I think our first 5 months we lost 94 people. So, every day, every other day, there's some sort of incident, and you're just staring down at providing coverage for, let's say, a Humvee just got hit with an IED, and it's upside down. That everyone in there is dying or either burning alive while you're watching, and you can just, and being more like an empath. You can pick up on the energy of people on the radio. You can pick up on the hostile feeling of just the environment. Like once we landed down in Fob Falcon in southern Baghdad, you could just feel like this oppressive weight. Like, it's just like the vibration or the energy of that place. And it kind of puts you in a dark, depressive mood. So you're already in a funky mind state, and then you're just witnessing these things day in and day out. And it's kind of like a mind fuck, I guess. It's trying to find the words for it. I definitely grapple with it a bit in the book, but the best I can say is in a way, it's just kind of like that scene from Clockwork Orange where they peel the guy's eyes open and force him to watch, despicable acts all day until he kind of goes mad. I guess that'd be a good metaphor for how life felt when I was over there. Cause you don't have any option to be like, no, I'm done now. That's not an option. And, you're working 12-hour shifts 7 days a week, and you're slowly becoming a psychologically darker, spiritually weaker, and that stuff can get to you more and more. And
it's such a weird position to be in too. Like as you're describing it, so I'm imagining, a bomb goes off or there's an attack or something. They tell you the coordinates, you send the drone over it. Yep. You're observing from a height that gives you enough detail that you can see people running around behind buildings, taking cover, preparing an ambush or something, and you're warning, the guys coming in with Humvees, you're warning them like, hey, there are two guys behind that building to your right. Be careful. Maybe you see they're carrying weapons. Then you call in helicopter strikes. You're in this bizarrely godlike position, at least in the sense that sort of understanding of God as an observer who doesn't participate in a way,
right.
People say, well, why does God let babies have leukemia?
Right.
And it's like, well, God just sort of sets it all up and watches. He sees everything, but he's not really getting involved, Yeah. You guys got involved in some sense, but you weren't shooting any weapons. You were just observing. You must have felt kind of strangely omnipotent and helpless at the same time.
Yeah, helpless is a perfect word. Because there are times where you would see, okay, there's an enemy combatant. They have something in their hands, but this is inevitable. Like the trucks are already there. They're about to pass this corner, and then you see a guy pick up a rocket launcher and shoot it at a truck. And you're just like, well, and you beat yourself up about those things, but it doesn't work that way. It's not that quick on the battlefield. Right. And you can definitely beat yourself up and go through all these different missions and think, oh, I wish I could have done this. Or, if we had only been there 5 minutes earlier or had come in from a different angle, we would have seen that threat. And not just the things that I witnessed with the American soldiers, but some of the missions we had where, there was one time we saw somebody with a bag in their arm, and they were crossing these ditches we had around the city where we really only wanted people to go through designated checkpoints so that we could search their vehicles. And this guy was bypassing that whole system. So we had reason to be suspicious immediately. He had something in his arm. It could have been a munition, like an artillery round. I didn't feel comfortable calling it that, but other people in my group were like, yeah, that's definitely what that is. And we followed that guy as he drove around town to his house. And then, helicopters were already on site. And the guy goes into his house, and then he comes back out to his car. And in the time that took, I swing over to his car, and they're like, okay, go look at his house now. His house is gone. It's blown up. Like, it happened that fast. And then they're like, okay, go back to the car. And then his car was blown up. So, there's not very much due process in some of these decisions. And, you're going by your best judgment. And, that's a particular incident that I don't want to say it haunts me, but I do think about it from time to time. Like, I think that guy got a pretty rough go of that one. He could have been smuggling in some sort of medicine. He could, it didn't feel good to me. But at the same time, there are missions where, and I do talk about this in the book, where we would cheer. He would kill some people, and we'd cheer about it. And then when you step back years later and say, well, why would you cheer the death of another human being? And it's just, it's just this tribal or us versus them ideology that separates people. And
did you guys ever talk about the fact that you were in their country? And how that would affect things if they were in your country,
Oh yeah, that's the interesting thing about being a drone pilot. Like, we were basically sitting in a box on the back of the truck, almost like, basically looks like one of those campers that you set down on the bed of a pickup truck. And it had some swivel seats, a bunch of computers, and we'd be looking around town, and we just get in these long, wide-ranging conversations. Like, if a foreign military came into our country, I would be doing the exact same thing that these guys are doing, trying to, I would be planting bombs. I'd be shooting at them, taking pot shots, sniper fire, that sort of stuff, just to protect my country and the way of life as I understood it. And I don't know if they had a great idea of what we were trying to accomplish there. I don't think our leadership had a great idea of what we were trying to accomplish there. But there are definitely times where, you'd see an old guy smoking a hookah on the top of his house, at like 10 at night. Like, that guy's probably a cool dude. I'd like, it'd be interesting to have a conversation with a human like that. I mean, what does he think about what's going on in the country? Like, what is his perspective of everything that's happening? Are we helping? Are we actually helping? And, I think when there's two sides, both sides can perceive actions as being evil. So, I'll listen to like Jocko Willink's podcast occasionally, and he'll say like he was there fighting evil. And yeah, certainly there's a lot of despicable stuff going on in the country at that time. I was there during the Civil War, and the Sunni and Shia were essentially slaughtering each other. But I'm also open-minded enough to step outside of my shoes and put myself in the shoes of the Iraqis on the ground. And I can guarantee that some of the stuff that we did, they would consider being very evil. So that's one of these paradoxes. Like, do I choose a side? Like, can I go through life and not be on a side? Like, that feels better to me, kind of being a man without a country. But at the same time, I think we do benefit from having a military as far as like, just as a prevention mechanism. I feel like that's probably reduced suffering just for the sake of having a military. So, that people don't want to attack us,
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I think that's a complicated question right there.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think there's a big difference between having a military that is, designed to keep people out of our backyard and a military that's got, 500 bases all over the world.
Yeah.
It's like, what the fuck, man? Like, okay, Civil War sucks. But we're in there, getting our nose into the Iraqi Civil War, but not in Rwanda, when even more people were being killed. Why? Because there's no fucking oil in Rwanda. That's why. This isn't about fighting evil. There's evil all over the place, including the United States. This is about geopolitical strategy. So sorry, Jocko, but I don't buy that bullshit. That, crusades fighting evil shit. Come on now.
Right. And, I know that this is going to be controversial, but I know that I've already said that soldiers that join are, they have good intentions for the most part, many of them. But if you look at how they're actually being used by politicians, I'd say a lot are just useful idiots. It's like, because you're being lied to and you're lapping up the lies, and then you're going out. Yeah. And
that's why 17-year-olds are perfect, right?
Yeah.
Because they'll listen to that bullshit.
And it can take a lifetime to realize the errors of your ways. And, I grappled with that. I struggled with it. And it almost pains me to say those sorts of things, but that just shows how far maybe our country has deviated from the ideals that I think we all would want it to stand for or want it to actually live up to. Yeah.
Well, I think we owe our allegiance to the ideals, not to the politicians or political parties or, whatever. It's like the difference between serving God and serving the Pope, right? It's like those are two very different things. Anyway, listen, Nate, I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate what you're doing in terms of talking about your experiences in your book and on this podcast and elsewhere, and also, trying to pay it forward to the next Kurt Vonneguts that are coming down the road. I think that's an awesome thing to be doing. And, I think one thing that we all have to sort of think about is forgiving our younger selves for being stupid, young shitheads, which everyone is. Yeah. Nobody's got it worked out at 17, or 18 or 19. And the older I get, the more clearly I see that. And, I think everybody makes mistakes at those ages and hurts people, hurts themselves. But when you're taken away from home and subjected to intensive training and put into a foreign country and you're overwhelmed by all that shit, it's much easier to get you to do things that you're going to regret later. And I know a lot of people are grappling with that kind of regret. And, I think that if they can transform that regret or that impulse towards service, as you're doing, into being of service to peace and understanding and intelligence and forgiveness, that's fucking awesome work, man. It's so necessary. And who's in a better position to do that than guys who have actually, been there.
Yeah.
So, I'm a big fan. Veteranarts.org is where people should go to donate, or I guess you probably have for people who might want to sign up for this. Is that where they would go as well?
Yeah,
it's all there.
Of course.
Good.
Yeah, it's all there. Yeah, I appreciate you. Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to help me get the word out and have some conversation. Appreciate that very much.
No, it's awesome. It's awesome. And tell people the name of your book again.
It's Waking Up on the Appalachian Trail. You can find it on
Waking Up,
Amazon, wherever you find books. And I can send you a signed copy if you go to nbhankes.com. So
all right, signed copy.
Yeah.
Now all you need is T-shirts and beer koozies, man.
Yeah. Coming right up. No. Right. I appreciate it, man.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you very much. And good job on your book. I just recently finished the audio book, and it was great.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Thanks. I wish I could have had Kurt Vonnegut read it.
Yeah. He's got that southern accent. It's nice. All right. Thank you very much, man.